Okay, y'all, this is World War One Part 1 video. So what you need to do before you watch this video is make sure you have read in your history book, all right? So if you haven't read in your history book yet, you need to go back and do that. You also are going to need your notes pages from your packet, all right? There's going to be 3 pages you're going to do. 1 page is front and back, and then the 3rd page. So make sure you're finding those first pages. The first one is titled The War, the Steps to the War. Okay, so this is your first video that you should have watched, your extended learning video. You should have watched that yesterday. So let's get started. Remember, if I go too fast and you feel like you can't write things down, you are more than welcome to pause it. All right. So the first word you're going to write down is nationalism. Nationalism is the love of one's country and the desire to have that country free from control. So what was happening is that tensions were growing in Europe as more countries wanted to become independent nations. So you've got groups of people that are being controlled by bigger countries that were tired of them controlling them. They wanted to live the lives the way that they thought would be best for their people, but they were being controlled. So tensions are growing, and obviously when people don't feel like their country is being taken care of, well, that's when they have uprisings and when it causes wars, right? So, along with that, is that the powerful European countries wanted more wealth and power. They were competing, all right? And the competing for that land was in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Now, why land? Land is a place where more people could go and live. Land could have natural resources for the people to have for their country, but also to sell to other countries, right? So that's going to give them a way to have money. And if they have a lot of money, that means they have a lot of power because they can build armies, they can have new technologies, and those types of things. So all these countries are going to be competing with each other, all right, over that land. With that, you're going to start seeing alliances formed, all right? Number 3. An alliance is an agreement when one nation just says that they're going to defend the other one, all right? They're going to be friends, all right? So think about if you see your friend getting bullied on the playground, you're going to go and you're going to defend your friend against the bully. You're going to tell the bully to go away or to stop being mean or whatever it is. You might come tell the teacher. You might come tell me, what you saw. So the countries were kind of doing the same thing. They were making allies, right? So that they could help each other. Now, if it came time to a war, why do you think that countries wanted allies? What were they afraid of? Thinking about allies and putting 2 countries together, you're going to have more people. You're going to have a stronger army. You're going to have a better chance of winning. So they're afraid of losing. They're afraid of their country being taken over and their people being abused or killed because of what another country might do to them. All right. So alliances are going to be formed, and that's going to make it be more of a world war instead of a one country versus another country war. So here's your 2 sides. You've got your central powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Turkey. And then you've got your allied powers, which are Great Britain, France, Russia, Serbia, and Belgium. Now, for the most part, you're going to see that the central powers, all right, they're going to be the ones that are going to try to be ruling by force. And while the allied powers, they're going to be the ones that are trying to rule for their people, all right? So we're going to come in, the United States is going to come in under the allied powers, all right? So we don't really want to say, good versus bad guys, but definitely when you think about how a country was ruling, you're going to be thinking about the allied powers treating their people well, all right? So, the first thing that really happened was with Austria, Hungary, and Serbia. Okay, Austria-Hungary controlled land that people in Serbia believe was theirs, right? So they're going to be very upset. This is in the year 1914. They're going to be very upset over this land. So what's going to happen is that Archduke Franz Ferdinand, this is him right here with his wife, he was heir to the throne. That means that he was going to be king, right? He was visiting Sarajevo to inspect armed forces. Well, while he was there, just like you read in your history book, he was murdered. He was assassinated, just like President Lincoln. Both he and his wife were murdered. And when that happened, this caused such a problem between the two that Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Okay? So you can go and you can watch that video about Franz Ferdinand to find out more about his assassination. All right, now you need your notes, page 2. The fighting begins. So, in July 28th, 1914, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia because of the assassinations. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia right here. July 30th, 1914, Russia prepares to help Serbia because they are afraid their trading route will be disrupted. So Russia says, I'm going to help you, Serbia, right? So when Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, then Russia is going to declare war on Austria-Hungary and help Serbia because they're afraid that they're going to lose some of their wealth and power. But then on August 1st, Germany asks Russia to back down. Russia refuses, so then Germany declares war on Russia. So you've got all 4 of these countries either fighting together or against each other, right? Then the next thing that happens is Germany asks France whose side they're going to be on. France doesn't respond. They're just kind of quiet. They're trying to stay out of it. They definitely don't really want to be in a war. But because of that, Germany declares war on France. All right? So now's when things get a little bit tricky. We're in August 4th, 1914. Germany asked the King of Belgium if troops could travel through their country to get to France. So Germany's going to ask the King of Belgium if his troops can come in and then down. The king refuses, so Germany invades Belgium. Great Britain declares war on Germany because it's allied with Belgium, okay? So Great Britain, right here, is the island, and they're saying, wait a minute, we need to help our people in Belgium. Now, when we think about an invasion, that means that troops are coming into Belgium on their foot. They're going to have airplanes dropping bombs. We're going to have tanks and those types of things to come in, and they're going to try to take over the country of Belgium. So now you've got all of the countries in Europe that you've got a name next to fighting together and against each other for this war. Okay, so in your opinion, why do you believe that these countries were so quick to declare war with one another when they knew that so many people would be affected and hurt? All right, so think about it. What would cause a country to think that war was worth it, right? Is it because they wanted their people to be hurt? Or was it because they thought that what they were fighting for was worth it? They believed in what they were fighting for. Whether it be because they wanted to make their nation better with more power, or because they were protecting their nation from someone who wanted their land. Either way, they had to fight. They had to fight to protect what they thought was right. So, here we go. And the actual fighting is going to start to happen. And it's going to be very different than the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Remember, back in those times, you'd have one side here and one side here, and they would march towards each other, or they would fire guns at each other and cannons, and then whoever was left standing the most on either side would have won. Well, this war is going to be very different because it's going to be trench warfare. And it's going to be the type of fighting during World War I in which both sides dug trenches protected by mines or little bombs and barbed wire. Right? I don't know if you guys have ever tried to even have seen barbed wire, or if you've thought about that, but think about thorns and how hard they would be. You can't get through barbed wire. So what they would do is they would build these huge holes in the ground where they could get down in. They would sleep in these holes They would eat in these holes. They would basically do everything, every part of their life down in the trenches of the land. And then up at the top, there would be sandbagged. All right, this is going to be to protect them from missiles firing in. And then you're going to have mines set up so if someone tried to get up into their trench, it would stop them. Now, this is an example of a German trench. All right. So, in the other trenches would have looked very similar. You're going to have the front line trench right here, right? And that's going to be where your guys are going to be see the most fighting in the trench. You're going to have a section of barbed wire that's going to keep them from being able to get into your front line trench. But then you're going to have a mined area of no man's land. And that's going to where your the other side is going to try to get into, all right? No man's land. The stretch of land between the trenches on the opposing sides has already been churned up by shell fire. In wet weather, it becomes a mass of mud, making it even harder for troops to cross. So you can see these huge craters of water because what would happen is it would rain and it would get super muddy. Also, you've got long range artillery placed way back here. You've got 3 lines of trenches. This is going to be the front line. That's going to be where the fighting is the worst. And then you've got your back lines. That's going to be where your generals and your leaders are going to be. And the Germans actually were able to go 15 meters below ground, and the shell fire couldn't get all the way down to the bottom. Along with all of this happening on the land, you're going to have airplanes flying across the trenches. Dropping bombs and attacks as they could, all right? So, definitely a very interesting picture here of what the fighting would have been like, okay? So, you can go and watch that video on the trenches. All right, here is some pictures. You've got this fella here, and he's leaned up. Notice how his head is not above the trench, but his gun is pointing towards over. That's going to be the way a majority of the fighting was happening. They wanted to protect their heads and their faces because if they saw their head pop up over, they knew exactly where to shoot. And obviously you can see his fallen comrades here that were not as lucky as he. This is an example of the trench, what it would have looked like. Obviously the trench here has rained, right? The water, you can't keep the water from falling in your trench, and the men would stand in this all day long. They would stand in it all day long. They were living in it. And it wasn't good. It wasn't good, and it caused a lot of sickness. So the problem was trench foot, okay? Really gross. But after standing in that mud for that long, their feet would get basically poisoned. It's called gangrenous, right? And they would very frequently have to amputate. So we lost a lot of soldiers because of that, okay? Here's your machine gun. All right, that's going to be a new type of technology. You got poison gas, gas mask, airplanes, machine guns, tanks, and submarines, right? Tanks, airplanes, machine guns, poison mask, right? That's going to be how they're going to be fighting in this particular war. All right, so the submarine is the U-boat, the German U-boat. That's going to be the big enemy of this war. Torpedo ships would, they would send torpedoes into enemy ships and blow them up without us even knowing that they were coming. Really, really scary stuff here, friends. Okay, so this is the end of part 1. So I'm going to stop this, but all I want you to do is switch over to part 2. Switch over to part 2 with your notes, right? See you in a second.